In today's video, we're going to be running through my top mistakes that I've made over the past few seasons, and I don't want you guys to make this season and get the best start in your mini league and hopefully win it as well. Now, before we dive into today's video, of course, if you do enjoy any of the content that you see on the channel, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe as we're trying to hit 16,000 subscribers before the start of the new FPL season. And it'd be absolutely amazing if we could hit that goal. So let's dive into one of my first mistakes then. I see a lot of people make, especially with some of the drafts I've been reviewing over the opening few weeks of the game being released, and it's too many differentials within people's teams. So my honest advice for you guys to avoid this is going to be, don't be different for the sake of being different. Don't go for, those players that are around 1 to 5% owned that you think are going to do well. Obviously, there'll be some that go under the radar, but most of the top players are going to be very highly owned, and that's for a reason, to be honest. More often than not, you get that player that you think, yeah, he's going to do really well this season. It's probably like a couple percent owned. And then, of course, it backfires because nobody else is really kind of focused on that one player. The other players that were highly owned have done exceptionally well because, a template always forms. And usually that template is pretty correct with its players' picks. So like I said, pick one or two, have a little bit of fun with your game, but don't go overboard. Don't just be picking a full team of differentials. Focus instead on combinations. Even when some players are exceptionally highly owned, they can still become differentialed when they are paired with others. And that is honestly one of my big takeaways from last season. I mentioned it in one of my videos on how to win FPL earlier in the season. If you want to go and check that out, I'll leave a link in the description, or you can just go to the channel. And basically I said, I had for large parts of last season Isaac, Visser and Mbeumo. Now, over the course of the season, they were very highly owned, probably, around 30, 40, even 50% most of the time throughout that period. But in combination, it was around like 15, and I think it peaked at 20% owned. So that is my top advice for you for the first one. Don't just be aiming for differentials. Like I said, try and focus on those combinations. The goal of FPL is ultimately to build the best team, not just one that is different for the sake of being different. Now, of course, if you're looking for more top tips on how to improve this year in FPL, one of my top pieces of advice is, of course, going to be heading over to Fantasy Football Hub's website. Make sure you're going to be dominating your mini leagues this season. As you can see, they've got 5 stars over on Trustpilot, and right now in the description, you can go and get your team rated for free by their AI. It's a really, really useful tool. I've been using it over the past few days to iron out players that potentially I'm maybe overlooking with my own personal bias. And I think it's a really, really good tool for that. So like I said, link in the description if you want to go and check that out after today's video. The next mistake that I see so many FPL managers make is not planning ahead. You see it so many times within your mini leagues. You get people where they'll have a good team for 1 or 2 few weeks. They'll see just the free fixtures on the FPL app when they click on a player, but they won't look past that point and potentially make a few suspect transfers as well, especially if a player's doing well, but all of a sudden they've got, loads of reds coming up. They've got some really difficult fixture runs. They won't look at that, and then they'll be left with a player that was doing well when they had good fixtures, but now coming into a run of really difficult fixtures. And it honestly hinders some people massively, because then you've got to make transfers. You miss out potentially on the next player that's going to do well because you're trying to fix your team. It's just not ideal. One of the big things as well this season, of course, with the addition of two lots of chips at the start and the end of the season, is you need to be planning ahead more than ever, really, because before, a lot of our content creators' kind of chip strategy for you guys was pretty much just leave your chips, wait for the double game weeks at the back end of the season. That is now gone. Now you need to have a plan for those first 19 game weeks. Of course, we've got the 5 free transfers as well for AFCON. There's so much planning that has to go into this season to find the best points to, of course, get the best out of every single chip you've got available, and also deal with those 5 extra transfers, the players potentially off to AFCON as well. Honestly, I think there's going to be so much more planning in FPL this season that is going to be required. But like I said here, this is honestly, again, one of those basic tips that I think a lot of people need to be doing. Just sit down. One of my top advices is open up websites, like I said, like FPL.team or Fantasy Football Hub. Go through their fixture tracker. Pretty much what I've been doing is loading my team in, skipping through the next few weeks, which you can do on Fantasy Football Hub as well. Looking at where my players have good fixtures, looking at where, of course, my team needs a little bit of strength and maybe certain players I need to be targeting or fixture runs I need to be targeting. And that honestly has opened the door up and completely changed the way that I play the game. And it honestly, again, is just going to be one of those easy mistakes that I think you can very easily rectify from your game and make you a much better player this season. The next one is going to be just special for this season, and it kind of links back to the last point we talked about with, of course, planning ahead in the chip strategies, and it is going to be ignoring rule changes. Obviously, we got the 2 additional chips, but one of the big changes is, of course, going to be the DEFCON points, or the defensive contribution points, whatever you want to call it. This is completely going to change the game, and I don't think people realise how big an impact this is going to have on it. They'll be like, no, it's only 2 points, it doesn't really matter. Like I said, go and look at the players that scored well in this metric and how it completely changed every single defender's kind of position. No longer were the top attacking defenders near the top. It was Milenkovic. Then you had Murillo. You had Tarkowski right up there. I think he finished like 5 points behind Trent Alexander-Arnold last season if DEFCON was in. And he's a player that I don't think anybody ever owned at any point last season. So like I said, it's going to completely change the game. And I think some people are just being a little bit, like, oh, forget it. I don't want to pick a defensive midfielder. I don't want to pick a centre-back. I'm not paying 5.5 million for these guys. But let me tell you, I honestly think you're going to be missing out on FPL gold. And I think it's one of those things that you're going to have to just suck up a little bit, learn about it, find the players that do well for these metrics. Because like I said, it might only seem 2 points, but those start adding up over the course of the season. And it just, for me, feels like one of these things you need to be taking on board. Obviously, I've covered it in depth over the channel as well on some of the enabler videos, a lot within my drafts as well. I know some other content creators have done amazing work on the DEFCON points as well. But like I said, I think it's just going to be one of these things you need to take full advantage of this season. So don't just ignore it. Don't just think it's, just a little 2 points every single week. It's not. It really, really starts to add up over the course of the season and could be the difference between you winning your mini league and potentially coming second or third if you're not going to take full advantage of it. Let's move on then to my next avoid, and it is going to be, taking too many hits. Every -4, it adds up. This season as well, you can roll up to 5 transfers, very similar to last season. And of course, we've got our 5 extra for AFCON. So that, for me, feels like there's no real incentive, especially at the start of the game, to be taking hits. There's probably not going to be any double game weeks unless there's like random postponements. But it just feels like, for me, the -4 has had an even bigger hit to the game. I've seen some other content creators talking about potentially dropping it down to a -3 to potentially bring that edge back to the game. But right now, for me, I honestly think there's no point in taking hits right at this time in the game. There just doesn't seem that point within the game. Because even if you get, in a situation where your team's looking a little bit ropey at the start of this season, you've got that wild card in the back pocket, and if you wait till game week 13, you've got another 5 transfers potentially coming in the back pocket. So you're going to be in a position a lot, especially at the start of this season, where hits for me just feel a little bit invalid, and I don't think people are going to be taking them. So like I said, smart planning, patience are going to be more valuable than the knee-jerk hits. And one of the other things as well, like we just spoke about with the defensive contribution points, is I think even sometimes, you'll see like your player's got like a load of red fixtures coming up and you think, yeah, I don't want him. I'm going to take a -4. I'm going to bring in someone who's just got good fixture this week or good fixtures over the next few. But like I said, with those DEFCON defenders or DEFCON cheap midfielders, they're probably going to be players that can just tick along in the more difficult fixtures. You think maybe if, one of your defenders, let's say Murillo, he's playing Liverpool or City, he loses 1-0, but he picks up his DEFCON points and he gets his 2 points for playing. He could have come away with 4 points. Like, that's not bad. Like, it's just not worth the -4, is it, when the player's going to be scoring 4 anyway? So like I said, I really, really think the DEFCON and, of course, the additional transfers this year and the extra chips is all making the hits just seem a little bit redundant in this season's game. And I think if FPL want to bring hits back, they're probably going to have to tweak the minus level that it is going to be for future seasons. And my next tip is going to be making early transfers. Now, across the start of the season, there's going to be, a lot of players that will go up in price very, very quickly. That's just going to happen because there's so many players within the game. We saw it last year. But still, I would remain patient. I would not be jumping on a player, especially with so many midweek games coming up this season, especially once European football starts to kick in. That is where we're going to see so many problems, I think, this season arise, because we've got more teams than ever in Europe. We've got 9 teams in Europe this season, so even more midweek injuries, in my opinion, are going to happen because you're going to have more teams playing more games. That means then that the level load and the workload for those players is going up. which means, of course, there might be more rotation that you might find out later in the week with press conferences, more injuries as well that could sustain over Europe. So I think, again, making early transfers is also going to take a little bit of a hit this season, in my opinion, because, like I said, we've got so many players now that that are going to be playing European football, that there's just that level of uncertainty going to just keep rising and rising and rising. Now, I've seen quite a few people like get away with making early transfers, and I definitely think there is sometimes a case for it. Maybe if it allows you to build potentially a bigger move for a premium, maybe like the next week or the week after, and it's part of that transitional plan, then I don't mind it as much to potentially catch that price rise. But just catching a price rise just for the sake of it, I think is definitely going to be out of the window this year for me, to be honest. Like I said, with so many teams, once European football starts to kick in, the cup competitions start to kick in as well, I just think it's not a sensible move or a sensible play, in my opinion. I think there's going to be so many more injuries to teams like, Nottingham Forest, Palace with their European involvement this year, that you're just not going to expect it, and there's going to be a lot more kind of churn within those squads as well. So making early transfers for me, again, another one I would put on the back burner and kind of try and get rid of it within my playstyle of the game. Let's take a look then at my final mistake that I want you guys to be avoiding this season, and it is going to be chasing points from last week. We've all done it. We've all been there. We've fallen into the trap of buying a player that hauled the week before. He's gone off. He's got a hat-trick. He's done great. But what we've not noticed is the form that he's taken into that game, the fixtures that he's got coming up, and potentially his underlying data as well, looking at it. Or maybe he played out of position, or just doing a little bit more due diligence rather than, of course, chasing the bandwagon, jumping on a player, looking for that one guy that, he got a hat-trick last week. I remember Marmoush was definitely within that category last year, got a hat-trick. People were like, this is the guy, he's back. I saw his ownership shoot up, and then did pretty much niche for a large proportion of the season. Like I said, don't be just chasing these players that do well in one-off weeks. Look for the players that are talisman. That's my number one thing. Look for the players that are talisman. So if Jared Bowen got a hat-trick, it wouldn't surprise me. Mohamed Salah got a hat-trick, wouldn't surprise me. These guys score. They score goals, they do it well. That already would be like not something to worry about. If it was, say, somebody a bit more rogue, like, say, a Paqueta this season, or like a Beto last year, right? He just starts scoring, you're thinking, I've never seen you do this before. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give myself a little bit of time to think. Look at the form, look at what fixtures you've coming up, and delve a little bit deeper into their per 90 stats. Again, something you can do over on Fantasy Football Hub if you want to after this video. Before, of course, just jumping in and picking a player that, again, will probably never hit that max that he did that one game week after you bought him in. I've seen it so many times, and again, is going to be something I'm going to recommend for you guys to avoid from your game for this season. Let me know what you think of today's video. Are there any mistakes I've potentially missed, or any that you're making that you think are hampering your game? Of course, any other questions about FPL, get them in the comments section. But if you did enjoy today's video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe.